All right, it's enough of the countdown. Gonna totally ignore the countdown, and we are going to go live. So excited today. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. Joining us today is Medina Williams. Really excited to have her on the show. And like we always do, we're going to run through the bio and then we're going to get into our show. Medina Williams is a certified fraud examiner and doctoral student in technology at Purdue University. Medina has various years of private and public sector experience in the fields of financial institutions, shipbuilding, and hospitals. She currently works as a business analyst at a management consulting firm. Medina is fascinated by tech advances, particularly in the financial services, but always looks for the trade-offs and vulnerabilities. Welcome, Medina, to the Tech Behind FinTech. How are you doing today? Of course. That's excellent. So to the audience, as you know, this is another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech where we talk about the technology behind FinTech. Look, we have some guests on the side. Just let me post them. Ben is he's every week. Thank you, Ben. Hi everyone. Happy Friday. Happy Friday to you, Ben. Let's see who else we have on real quick. Eric Williams. Good afternoon, Medina and Nnamdi. Good afternoon, Eric. John Carpenter, my guy from the Cloud Security Alliance that we do some research on blockchain with. Hey, John, how are you? Happy Friday to you too, John. All right, excellent. So as everyone knows, the format of the show, if you're new, what we do is we discuss some current topics in FinTech, and then we move on to the topic of the day. And today's topic of the day is, can the fraud triangle be applied to FinTech? It's so funny because somebody I work with was like, what's the fraud triangle? I said, find out at 12 p.m. So we're gonna definitely get into that with Medina. She's an expert in that. And so let's do what we normally do and let's talk about the current news of the day. So obviously, because of our time, we're not going to go over all FinTech news, but we usually go over some news articles that we found interesting that is somewhat related to the topic. So the first article of the day, Square finally launches a bank after filing first the application in 2017. So Square, it's a payment company. Obviously, it's valued at $55 billion. It's officially launched a bank after filing its application for the banking license back in September 2017. The name of the new bank is called Square Financial Services. The bank landed its industrial loan company (ILC) license from the FDIC just a year ago. It's important to note that when Square originally tried to form a bank, it didn't work out for them. And there's an organization called the Independent Community of Bankers basically told the FDIC that Square's application skirted around legislation under the Banking Holding Company Act. They then went back and focused on regulatory concerns around infrastructure and governance and then resubmitted. So the actual bank is based out of Salt Lake City. And they will issue loans and offer deposit of insured accounts. Real interesting. So from their CFO, Amrita Osuagwu, I think I totally butchered that name. Sorry. Bringing banking capability in-house enable us to operate more nimbly. So, last thing before you jump in, Medina. So Square says 58% of Square's capital loans go to women-owned businesses and 35% of loans go to minority-owned businesses. So, and last other point is, so a lot of fintechs are forming banks. Some going through what Square has went through, problematic. So what they opted to do is just acquire a bank in order to become a bank. So examples include Transact Pro's purchase of Colorado National Bank in 2018, and Lending Club bought Radius Bank for $185 billion in 2020, I think. So What are your thoughts on that, Medina?
I think Square is continuing to just carve out their footprint in this financial services industry. You can see that they had to clear up some things because they started running afoul into like the holding companies, but they found their niche. It sounds like to me that they kind of are looking in the microfinance, picking out a specific pocket within certain groups that they're targeting, and then we'll grow from there. So I'm anxious to see how this looks. Of course, Square is, part of Cash App and expanding their, again, their footprint, with the cryptocurrencies and now with their own financial institution. But certainly brings up a lot of concerns, more regulatory issues, since, again, I very much doubt that we're probably going to be going to a physical Square bank. So in the digital space, it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of it.
What I find interesting is how, you have, and it brings us to a next news article, but you have other banks with all these branches, and these guys are like, look, we just need this one branch in random in Salt Lake City. No one ever's going to go into because we're all going to have the app. Another interesting point, Square made the news because they just bought a major stake in Jay-Z's Tidal company, and he actually, Jay-Z, aka Sean Carter, he just joined the Square board. So, me being born and raised in Brooklyn, that's a big deal. It's a big deal. So I'm pretty excited about that. So that's pretty cool. And so I mean, what they're doing, it definitely is totally different. And it's aligned with fintechs, right? And what's interesting now, if we shoot to this other article that's related, there's been tons of branch closures with different banks. So there's a few things I want to mention. 3 banks, Bank of Ireland, TD Bank, and HSBC. So HSBC announced the closure of 82 branches in January, set to take place between April and September of this year. TD Bank has announced it will close 82 of its retail shop fronts in the U.S., accounting for 6.7% of their 1,223 branches. The Bank of Ireland is ceasing operation of more than half its North Ireland branches, slashing 15 of its 28, despite counting as one of North Ireland's big 4. So from the CEO, Greg Braca, the TD cuts came down to the need for investment in digital and digital capabilities. So it's extremely interested to see. What are your thoughts on that, Medina?
Clearly TD Bank, along with the rest of them, are pivoting more into the digital space. Certainly there's more risk with that. Some other thoughts with the Bank of Ireland. I've had the pleasure of going to Ireland. There's been a lot of discussions there. So Northern Ireland, of course, is still part of Britain. And with Brexit, I know that those two governments have been in discussion of, hard border. And I think that probably some moves of consolidation, in addition to, those just ongoing diplomatic discussions, is probably par for the course with why some of those closures we're seeing in the Bank of Ireland.
I mean, and we think about it. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I mean, I'll ask you, and I'll ask our attendees, when's the last time you've been to a physical bank, like literally inside a bank, since March of 2020?
Yeah, I think I was in there probably right around there just to get a Notary Public. That was it.
So that's the last time. So since March, you haven't been to a physical branch?
No need. There's so much stuff you can do with your smartphone, right?
That's the point. Hey, Ben, Eric, John, when's the last time you guys have been to a physical bank? Out of curiosity, just taking this rough poll right now. 3 times, Edward. Okay.
Brave man.
So Eric, let's okay. We're getting a couple of things. Oh, that's right. I see the comments, and everybody sees the comment. So Edward says 3 times. Okay. John says a few weeks ago. Okay. Ben, probably 2018 was the last time we took it. Okay. So, I mean, just from a little quick poll, nothing in 2020. So, and then in 2019. So, I mean, this is just from a quick user poll. this could explain why branches are closing. I mean, look,
Yep.
Put it like this. My mom, and she's not like, look, love her to death. She's getting into the whole technology thing. And she's like, I need you to teach me how to cash a check on my phone. When she starts saying that, you know it's real. Like when she doesn't go to a branch, when she starts using the phone app to cash checks, it's a wrap. That's all I'm saying. Okay. What else is going on? Ever says three times in March 2020. I think we have a question actually from Eric. Eric Williams. Medina, can you explain how precisely does the risk profile change with the migration to the digital space? Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I know we're going to get into that, kind of talking about some of the fraud triangle, the elements of that, and I've kind of married that up with some of the different security aspects that us as industry professionals look at within the cybersecurity space. So, I think just a short, quick answer to that. I think things aren't as tangible anymore, and I think you're dealing with, we'll say, kind of digital intellectual property, currencies and things of that nature. So I think it's, I think a lot of the government agencies are trying to, in a rush, to kind of figure out how to regulate and enforce things. So, it's just a lot of things that are less tangible, and a lot of regulatory agencies and a lot of other financial institutions that are, in a rush to kind of carve out that space. And then, security is coming after that, secondary.
And I mean, one thing I would say is this. I mean, something we talk about. I'm like Medina. I'm also a doctoral student, and one of the things that we talk about a lot of security classes is, and also I even mentioned to clients, right? Policy, human, technology, right? In that order. So when you go into the digital space, like, what are your policies that you're going to now start putting in place to manage things, right? Like, so now you have to kind of start looking at your risk, your data risk, your, IAM, identity access management. So it's a whole, like, what's the policies around it? Like, let's understand your processes, your policies. Let's understand, okay, what are the human interactions? And then let's see what can we use technology to automate that entire process. So that's, but now I think it's time to go into the topic of the day. And that is, can the fraud triangle be applied to fintech? So now let's answer the question that some people who are not as familiar with the fraud triangle have. Medina, what is the fraud triangle?
So it's a methodology that the ACFE, Association for Certified Fraud Examiners, through research by Cressley, has determined to be kind of some of the elements that make areas, certainly in the digital space, but in also the physical space, ripe for fraud. So those elements are, just pressure, whether there's financial pressure. Usually that's one of the things that we typically see from a lot of individuals who perpetrate fraud. There's some type of unspoken or unknown pressure that they're facing. Their ability to rationalize what they're doing in their minds, that, hey, everybody's doing it. Or, hey, it's only a little bit. The company won't really miss these funds or things of that nature. So it's those different elements of the fraud triangle that are really key to keep in mind when it comes to fintech as well.
So I think I know based on what you're saying. So we have three elements, right? We have pressure, we have the rationalization, and then we have opportunity. Right? Right. So three. Okay. Let's another question from hold up. Let's just jump in. Well, we always like to get the audience interaction. We appreciate you guys for that. Edward Cruz. Do we see more of an investment in crypto by banks with closing of the branches? I don't know if those two are related, from an investment in crypto. I mean, I know when we talked about banks a few weeks ago, we had a news article, Bank of New York, I think BNY, they're going to be the first to actually make crypto accessible through the banks. I think, and they were big on that. If I'm not mistaken, it was BNY. We covered that article in our news section a few weeks ago. I don't know if it's related. It's right now. It's like, how do you just get access to crypto from banks easy? That's going to be the first step. I just think it's a matter of, as we mentioned, just from our little user poll, right? If people are not physically going in, it's like, and then you have a lot of fintechs who are literally coming by and eating their lunch. I mean, I know my work at a big bank, that was like one of the biggest things. Right? They literally said, these guys are eating our lunch. How do we prevent it? And and you're talking like 100-plus-year-old banks, and you have people that are just starting out in the digital world. That's my long-winded answer to your question, Edward. Thank you for. We have another question coming from Eric. Let's see. Do you think the change to digital is going to drive more of an adoption of the digital signing of documents? The last time I was in the branch was to physically sign a document. Who will govern identity access management? That this coming seamless need to identify yourself. I mean, that's a great use case. I know there is a fintech that I was talking to a CEO of. I don't want to totally mess the name up, but they're big on the OCR technology. So they provide that, like scanning of documents, getting it in terms of just signing it. I mean, it's definitely an interesting use case. What are your thoughts on that, Medina?
With companies like DocuSign, really carving out their space, I think you're going to see a lot more of that. It's the risk, of course, and the vulnerability is, how does the financial institution, verify this identity, right, of the individuals that are signing it? You have your PKR certificates, but how do they, kind of manage their own vulnerability and their risk, but make this a legally enforceable document, digitally speaking? So that'll be a very interesting topic to see as we see that evolve and happen more often.
That's a good question, because I know I actually went into a branch to start it was a corporate account for like this thing you're doing, and they have cameras actually, and the manager said, yeah, part of the cameras is watching, literally taping you sign and different things of that nature right above his desk. So, just maybe that's a security idea for like some sort of video technology as we sign it remotely. Let's see. John has a question. It's going well. I love these questions. Keep it coming, guys. What are your thoughts around Square launching their own bank? My thoughts personally, the next phase of evolution, right? I'm a technologist by heart. I love it. So, if I don't have to physically go anywhere, but I can actually do things with my app, I think it's awesome. Obviously, there's another side to that, but I'm a technologist. I've been doing it, into it since I was 10, just looking for ways to automate. What are your thoughts on it, Medina?
I think again, Square is kind of carving out their niche. They're starting off small. Another kind of fintech that's kind of doing that is I don't know if you heard of this, but Greenwood Bank. They're kind of carving out their specific area within the community and going digital. So I think it's very interesting how they're going to probably iterate, refine their processes, and then continue to grow and expand. But again, we're moving more to like this mobile banking aspect where, again, we don't need those physical locations to go into and conduct business. It's going to be very much more peer-to-peer transactions and, very decentralized. So it's going to be very interesting to see. But of course, there's a lot of risk, right? The gentleman that you had on your show last week, talking about some of the different risks that are kind of pushed down to the consumer level. So the banks, maintain, their regulatory aspect, but then the risk is probably very much going to be pushed down to consumers, and just making sure we have those rights and those and things to enforce the safety and the value of the money that's going to be exchanged in these mediums.
Good. I like that. So let's jump back into the fraud triangle. Because like I said, when when you mention it to me, I'm going to be 100% honest. Even though I'm into security, I drink the security juice, the education, business, and all that stuff. I never heard of it put that way. And obviously to prepare for the show, I did my research. Like, it makes total sense now, and that's why they call it that. All right, we have another question from Eric. Let's go. Let's keep the questions coming, guys. This is awesome. All right, will the commoditization of digital signing box out people with lower income or financial means for banking transaction? What is the government's role in vetting PKI providers? Do you see the FinCEN being involved in monitoring and enforcing compliance? I'm going to have you take that one on, Medina.
Sure. Well, I'll probably start at the bottom and work my way up. So FinCEN is a Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. I'm very familiar. Okay. Had to deal with many of the handwritten documents that FinCEN requires the financial institutions to fill out based on certain transactions or certain threshold of transactions. I think, again, they're catching up with this digital revolution. I certainly feel like, with FinCEN, there's the whole aspect of know your customer, your anti-money laundering, because, we have, as I like to call, yes, AML, just a lot of opportunities for individuals, especially with this, the digital currency, to find ways to, insert illicit funds in the system too. I think, again, FinCEN is definitely going to come down, and once they clamp down, it's going to be hard, but they're still trying to catch up with this evolution and how to track things, especially with blockchain and all those other cryptocurrencies and capabilities.
The good thing about blockchain is it's literally all there, it's all on the chain. There was some interesting companies doing blockchain investigation work. I was literally reading about some in which it is so funny. Another angle, they actually work with divorce lawyers to track crypto currency from the spouse. So that was a real interesting. I was like, oh wow, I didn't even think about that upon reading it. Let's see what Eric is saying. Hold on, Eric, what do you say? Yes, that's the fraud angle I was thinking of. That's the job of FinCEN, as you have highlighted. Good stuff. So now I think we want to move into this great doc that Medina has brought with her, and let's add it to the stream and let's talk through it. All right, walk us through how the fraud triangle could, and I see one of my favorite things, CIA, the CIA triad. That's the staple for cybersecurity. Okay, let's go through it, Medina.
So some of the research that I'm starting to ask in my doctorate program is to kind of see how the fraud triangle transfers into the cybersecurity space. So since we have triangles and CIA has the three pillars, although I know that there's some talk about expanding them as well. I just wanted to kind of overlay some of the things, and we can see how there are some elements that are already kind of close together. So we have, the aspect of opportunity within the fraud triangle, just having the ability, whether it's lack of dual control, when you think about physical controls around a computer system, I think that also goes, in hand with, IAM as well. But then you also overlay that with availability, of the data. So, there's the two aspects that are kind of have a tendency to mutually kind of collide, the opportunity, but also you want to make sure, again, data availability is very important. Moving over to the right-hand side, as I mentioned before, you have the rationalization in the fraud triangle. A lot of fraudsters, they rationalize why they're doing it, from the pressure aspect. Hey, as I mentioned before, the company won't miss too much of these funds, or I'm going to go to Vegas and then I'm going to put it back the next week. Of course, we know that never happens. But then you also have, integrity of the data that you need to ensure. So, just having those two aspects, kind of trying to figure out where those collide and where there's some kind of common area, but then where there is a little bit of a difference. And then finally on the left side, you have, of course, your pressure. I mentioned that. thinking of it in the cyberspace, I mean, I like to call maybe cyber criminals just opportunists, right? So you have, sometimes there's the pressure, but then also, again, on the flip side of CIA is just, you got to, manage that confidentiality of the data. So, you have people who are pressured, who will do anything necessary to, try to, find some funds that they are needing. But then you also have to, from the company's perspective, a lot of times is maintain the confidentiality of the data. Looking at some of the applications I have on the right-hand side here, you think about AI, and that's great. It's a great way for us to leverage these vast amounts of big data that we have. But then you think about the risk of people inserting in fraudulent data and how that kind of perpetrates through the system. How are you going to have develop leading and lagging indicators to know when that's occurred? The same thing with automation. You want to automate things, but what if there's some, corruption or corrupted data in the system? So same thing with, the blockchain, the cryptocurrencies, and then the smart contracts. You got to really kind of think about the flip side of these things, about how, these are great tools, but they're vulnerable too. They're vulnerable to the data that's put in. And how can we, go into development of, with fintechs and things, knowing that, there are bad actors, we know but how are we going to make sure that we try to minimize their influence and their impact into the system? So.
Yeah, I mean, a few thoughts on that, right? I know we're actually working on a smart contract security standard as part of the Cloud Security Alliance. And John Carpenter, we're on the same. It's a professional organization. We both work together on that effort. The thing with smart contracts, I mean, obviously it's really, I look at it like another application. So for me personally, I look at it more as application security, that once it's deployed, it's immutable. So then, how do you think through and start putting things in place prior to deploying it on your blockchain? Obviously, when you go into the smart contract now, it's on the chain, but it's interacting with things on the outside that they call Oracle. So it's interesting how you put that with artificial intelligence. I like your point, because it's part of another research project I'm working with at Morgan. Is like, you're looking at AI, all that data, but now if you corrupt those images, then that's going to be problematic in the final result. And then with the rationalization and integrity, kind of want to jump into that. So I know we talk about integrity. It's like, okay, how do we track this data? Is this data accurate? Right. I know there's certain hashes and things you can use for that, right, that effort of rationalization. I need to understand that correlation. I don't fully understand that one.
The rationalization and integrity?
And correlation.
Right. So if you have somebody who's, rationalizing this information, they're more likely that they could, find ways to corrupt this data.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Totally get that now. Confidentiality and pressure, got that one, and opportunity and availability. Let's see some questions from the audience. Eric, there are some missing things for sure. I've always been a proponent of adding authenticity and with the advent of zero trust. Yeah, totally right. Eric, I think that the CIA was like the original, but there's other factors. 100% agree with you on that. And he says, yes, preach the gospel, on point, read AI machine learning. Love it.
Thanks,
I love it. So yeah, Eric is thanks for participating, man. I really appreciate you today, Eric. All right, let's go to the second slide. Is that okay? Do that right now?
Oh, we could. Those are my other slides that I have for some other projects I have. But yeah.
Okay. No, it's fine. We can keep it. We can keep it here. I didn't know if you want to go to the second or third one. So that's fine that we keep it here. Matter of fact, we're gonna keep it here. Is there a way that I can? I make this thing the whole thing. me try to do something here.
Yeah. The only other thing that I'll add while you're doing that is, just kind of looking at some of my other graphics here. As we're probably seeing, third-party risk is a very big deal here. You have to rely on these third parties, and as we continue to see from a lot of the let's say incidents with data spillage, we'll say, and companies being hacked for their data, that's an element of risk. Kind of to Eric's points about the government regulating PKI companies. Again, these are all elements that are aspects that the government needs to take into mind, and to the point that the government may end up incentivizing, so not necessarily getting directly involved with PKI and oversight, but just incentivizing the behaviors that they kind of want to see. But again, that doesn't take away from the risk from companies who are operating in the fintech space of having to do business with third parties. And once you take on, you have your own risk, but of course you take on the risks of those.
That third party, I mean, when you talk about third party, I'm always thinking from an application security standpoint, and that opens up. It's even deeper than what most would say. Okay, this is just a third party business that I'm interacting with. A lot of application security hacks that we see now is more coming from the supply chain. So third party can be as simple as root level as literally a library that you're using in your code, right? Because let's face it, no one is writing thousands of lines of original code. You pull in a library, you leverage that library to do other tasks, right? And sometimes you start leveraging a lot of open source libraries that you can be 5 versions behind, right? And you're just pulling it. It's just not really controlled. That process of gathering those libraries is not controlled in a meaningful way. So you can literally have something in your code that has open vulnerabilities in it that your firm doesn't have a policy around. So that third party risk, it spans throughout multiple levels on the supply chain. So that's a good point that you raised.
Right. And I will say, kind of my question there at the bottom there is all these aggregating all these risks up. When does it actually become fraud, right? Because the fraud is the intentional misrepresentation of, of facts or information in order to, gain something, of value, money, information, intellectual property. So, aggregating all these risks up, that companies have to do business, where's the level of responsibility for the companies, and when does it get pushed down to the consumers? And, having all these, data breaches that we see, we call it hacking, but, fraud and hacking are very, very close, bedfellows. It goes, very close hand in hand. But I don't think that there's quite a dividing line yet of, hey, this is definitely fraud versus, this is just a breach.
So I remember, when it was some stats around. I know back when I was at my master's program, we had one of my teachers, well, 2 teachers. They were both FBI agents, and the biggest thing that they see when a company's compromised, right? And after a while, that company comes to them, they want to actually, there's a crime that's been committed, huge on insider threat. So, it's a cybersecurity breach. It could have resulted from, a lot of times at that time, it was resulting from insider threat, whether through just gross negligence or intentional, right? Like disgruntled employee situation. So, and then you start seeing, okay, like that starts getting into fraud. I know there was a case where on the way out, this one developer took loads of data and code to go reuse. I mean, he was actually found out and was prosecuted, right? And that's a level of fraud. I mean, in his mind, like, I developed it, I'm taking this with me to go reuse it. The company's mind is like, yeah, but we own that, my friend. And that was fraud. See, Eric is killing it today. I love it. I love audience interaction. Please, guys. Brilliant, Nnamdi and Medina. Thank you for that. Yes, everyone uses a supply chain. The advent of apps used by banking interests provides a prime opportunity for threat actors with own perfunctory vetting of the code base. It's not the new data breaches only. It's the ones we have not discovered yet. Exactly correct. 100% agree with you there, Eric. Yeah. So, I mean, so to your point, I mean, it really starts getting real close when you start talking about fraud, and then when we start bringing in cybersecurity, start bringing in insider threat. Obviously, if it's somebody, you know, I clicked on this phishing campaign and it told me to reset my password, right? This guy's he's not trying to fraud you. He just lacks, or as an organization, you lack the proper security awareness, so you can educate them on that. But you know, when is it when, okay, I know it's my last day here and I'm downloading all of the investment firm's contacts so I can take with me, so I can start making phone calls, right? It's a level of fraud, right? And so it's interesting how those relate to your point.
Right. I know, I believe that Tesla recently had an issue with one of their engineers who decided to use Dropbox to pull out some sensitive plans and information. And, you know, certainly with companies, there's a reputation risk of letting this get out because it looks like that there's as you mentioned, like there's a weakness within. So they're very keen to, you know, keeping this under wraps. But it's definitely something that, especially in the fintech space, where it's almost, you know, you've been hacked or you haven't been hacked yet. So just something for a lot of these companies to keep in mind. But, you know, this fraud triangle helps with, you know, kind of really looking at those risks. And I looked at overlaying, you know, again, these CIA and I'll say plus principles, because I think a lot of them, you know, go hand in hand and, you know, just help give a broader picture of the risk that we've kind of really been kind of going into today. And some of the audience members have been mentioning as well. So.
And I mean, there's a few things I want to say about that, right? So, and this is a thing that we've been talking about lately or offline, where a lot of money gets spent on prevention, right? Can we prevent it? And another argument to that is more money should be spent on detecting, right? Because I mean, look, can you prevent 100% of all security issues? Probably not. But can you detect it? And the sooner it's detected, then, you know, the proper incident response and, you know, stop the leak happens. And it's like, how do you put things in place to detect it? So I want to kind of get into, before we start closing out, I know we're 8 minutes over. Can we leave some potential solutions? So back to the detection, right? An investment in real-time monitoring technology. Another thing that I looked at was an effective and trusted whistleblower channels. The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners reported that to the nations, highlighted how most frauds come to light through tip-offs or whistleblowing. The report found that businesses with whistleblowing hotlines detect frauds faster than those without such hotlines. So I saw that. Another one that I saw was, as we just talked about, compliance training, right? A culture of compliance needs to continue being built and fostered and maintained within companies. You know, the level of fraud tends to go up during recessions or hard economic times. A last one, case assessment and triage. With potential delays or inefficiencies being created in a timetable for undertaking investigation, compliance teams will need to prioritize fraud alerts. So that's back to detection and some sort of incident. I'm using incident response. I think it might be a different term in the fraud world, but right. You know, conceptually the same thing, right? It's like, okay, how are you responding to this stuff? Let's see what Eric is saying. What do you have for us, Eric? When we are developing the FinSim, we look strategically at the logic being proposed, a code review for the potential to install logic bombs like that via insider threat for certain classes of transactions. How do you feel that the fraud triangle is being applied to the overseas to prevent or detect that sort of insider threat? Good point. Medina, you want to take that on?
Oh, sure. Yeah. You know, I think just having the fraud triangle is just getting in the mindset of the fraudster, I think, and just looking at just general vulnerabilities that exist. We talked a lot about third parties here, but our human resources are our biggest strengths and our biggest threats. So really kind of pulling the needle of just the different areas where the code is vulnerable. And of course, just really having an atmosphere of continuous patching. I can remember in past organizations I was with, it was always Tuesday night patching. So I think, just having very good cyber hygiene of that nature. But also, just looking at case studies, looking at other organizations that have had the unfortunate experiences of being hacked or defrauded, and just bringing that back into your organization. And really, I think a lot of it is just getting a plan in place to prepare, instead of, really being reactionary and, or just kind of going into this thinking that things are going to be okay and that, everything is sufficient. Is really just kind of getting a plan, almost like a disaster recovery plan for fraud, that you really need to, run through maybe on an annual basis or periodic basis and review.
Not all good. And Eric, in terms of code detection, I mean now we're getting on that last thing, we're getting to the application security space. So as Medina mentioned with cyber hygiene and the concept of DevSecOps, the concept of shift left. So overseas I like code reviews, right? I still think that's a thing. Like we should do a review of code. Certain with what you're saying with the logic bombs, but yeah, certain static analysis, dynamic analysis, instrumentation of your code as you check in, putting it part of your CI/CD pipeline, and different things to try to detect. Like all these things, even though you might have certain detection tools, but these are also processes of detection in terms of having. Because let's say hypothetically, with the logic bomb example, if we do code reviews, that means and the other person doesn't detect it, either they're not knowledgeable of it or both people are in on it. So usually, and correct me if I'm wrong, Medina, with fraud, I mean, it looks like with the pressure of rationalization opportunity, it seems like a one person. You have multiple people in on it, right? That's a whole different scenario to detect. Right. Sounds like a conspiracy at that point, right?
Right. You never want a single point of failure, or, a single point of where you're relying on a specific group. You want that access across the board and just the ability to be able to look down. So, there is a sweet spot. Certainly, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, but you want to prevent, an atmosphere of continuous monitoring.
Yeah, continuous monitoring detection. Listen, I think today was a great show. I really thank you for joining. To the audience, I thank you guys for commenting. Everyone who commented, from Eric, John, Edward, let me roll up. Eric, John, Edward, Ben, everyone who's watching, we thank you very much. Dina, how can people follow you, find you, learn more about fraud? They want to keep up. What are your some handles or LinkedIn or website that they should look into?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. I kind of stay there and just really, just check a lot of news articles and things like that. But certainly the Association for Certified Fraud Examiners is a really good resource. They have a monthly magazine they put out, a lot of different elements of fraud that relate back to the cybersecurity space. Certainly would refer anybody with any interest in this to continue to follow that association. And, please feel free to link up with me on LinkedIn. The more the merrier.
Ben says, thank you for the great discussion today. Thank you, Ben, for watching. Appreciate you. John says, great presentation, Medina. Yes, I think so too, John. Eric, thank you, Medina and Nnamdi. Excellent in-depth presentation. Thank you guys for that. I appreciate you. And like always, I think that will conclude our episode. Remember, every week we are live 12 p.m. on Fridays. Definitely tune in, comment, check it out. We always talk about various topics around the technology behind FinTech. Thank you all for joining in. I wish you all have a great weekend, and take care and see you next week. Thank you very much, Medina. Really appreciate
Thank
you
you
for
for
joining.
having me.
Before we go off, stay off, I want to talk to you for a second. So
Sounds good.
thank you. All right, guys, take care. We're gonna go offline right now.